today's Thriving in Construction, the podcast, Michael Rubin. With nearly 20 years of experience in occupational safety and health law, Michael has advised and represented employers around the United States in connection with OSHA inspections, investigations, and enforcement actions. What sets Michael apart is his hands-on experience managing accident investigations and his skill in litigation before OSHA Review Commission. He has trialed multiple OSHA matters and has assisted clients in over 30 states from Alabama to Washington. Aside from being a sought-after legal counsel, Michael is also a respected speaker and guest lecturer. He frequently speaks at industry events such as safety conferences hosted by EHS Today, BLR, and the American Society of Safety Professionals. Michael also shares his experience as a guest lecturer at Columbia University in the Construction Management Master's Program. Join us today as Michael Rubin discusses OSHA legal issues and risk management strategies for employers. Welcome, Michael. It's my honor and pleasure to receive you here in Thriving in Construction, the podcast. Michael, thank you so much for coming into Thriving in Construction, the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and I am very impressed by your resume. I really have never seen someone with the level of education that you have that is so passionate about OSHA and has dived so deep into the topic. So I'm very curious about this interview, and more than an interview, this talk. I want to learn myself, but I also want our listeners to learn more about OSHA. It's not something that we, a lot of times I'm an engineer and I had a master in construction management, and we went through a class in OSHA. But this is more. You are the encyclopedia of OSHA for me.
Oh, wow.
So I would like for you to introduce yourself, your background, where you're coming from, please.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I hope I can live up to that initial introduction. So I'm a 20 plus year attorney. I went to Seton Hall Law School in Newark, New Jersey, lived and worked in New York City and New Jersey for most of my career. Presently, I'm in the Raleigh office of Ogletree Deacons. I'm a shareholder in the OSHA practice group. But I would say for the 20 plus years I've been an attorney, I've really focused on the construction industry. And about 10 years into that, profession and working as an attorney, I branched out and sort of went down a side street and really started focusing on OSHA. And now that is 100% of my practice, and I'm working along other very skilled and really reputable OSHA practitioners at Ogletree Deacons.
So for our education, when you say OSHA practitioners, what do you mean by that?
That's a great question. So OSHA, as you may know, has inspection authority. So for any number of reasons, an OSHA inspector may show up on a work site. If it's construction, they generally refer to it as a work site. If it's general industry or some other type of environment, they might call it the workplace. So OSHA will show up on construction sites. They do inspections, and we get involved. We would consider ourselves to be extremely knowledgeable and have a high level of expertise on what OSHA can do, what OSHA cannot do at sites, and we represent companies throughout the inspection process. But that's really just the beginning part, because then if a company gets cited, then we can represent the company during the post-issuance of the citation. And really that's where I think our knowledge comes in, what some people might not really understand or appreciate about OSHA is these are legal issues. So for OSHA to win on a violation, for example, it needs to prove different legal elements, and we guide companies through that process. But through it all, I would never want this to be lost, which is we try to help companies with their safety and health programs. And that's something very important to us. We don't get involved in just simply try to win. That's definitely part of it. But a very large part of it as well is educating companies on their potential exposures, how to enhance their safety program, because even the best safety, companies have the best safety programs in the world. You would say world-class safety and health programs. They are still every day trying to enhance their own safety performance and their own program. So it's a continuous improvement process. You never get to a point where you say, let's pat everyone on the back, we're safe now. You might reach certain, levels of safety, but it's really a lifelong struggle. And I was actually thinking about that earlier today. It only takes 1 second for something to go wrong. And that's the harrowing thing. 1 second of departure from what you normally do. And as an employer, there's a lot of pressure too, because you can train your employees, do everything to make sure everything goes well. But again, and we've seen this time and time again, it takes one instance for something bad to happen. So we get involved with all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I as an employer and also a construction company, you're talking and my mind is thinking about stuff. So I'm going to ask you a couple of things later, but they're particular to my example. For example, COVID was not in anything that we knew how to deal with. And
Right.
I remember 3 years ago, we were essential. We had to continue to work. And the regulations about the mask, the government came up with stuff. And we had a job site that was active. We had a lot of shell work. That means we were self-performing. And they would show up, the police would show up because they didn't have the manpower to be at every job site, but they showed up demanding certain things that, the applicability of what the CDC was saying to what we were doing in the field were like the left field. And but you still had the stress, not only to protect the people, but also to satisfy this request.
Yeah, COVID and the pandemic was something that, in our lifetimes, professionally, and then in the construction industry, no one had ever encountered anything even remotely similar to that. The way traditionally you handle compliance and with safety regulations and things like that, from prior experiences, if you look in prior experiences, you'll know exactly I think what's expected of you, but this was just developing second by second and new, literally every day something new was coming out. And then the focus changed over time too. For a while, it's very focused on masks. For a while, it was on disinfection and, washing hands and things like that. So that was just a really difficult time, I think, for everyone, in particular construction companies, to navigate. And of course, you lay on top of that it's a very hot political, hot button, emotionally charged issue that really brought out people's personal beliefs on what's right, what's wrong. And hopefully we're through that.
So have you seen, what are the biggest regulations that have been put in place in the last 24 years? What I mean by big, like most impactful that you have seen put in place and impactful in any way?
Yeah, well, I would say there are really two. One's a standard and one is it's the general duty clause of the OSHA Act. So OSHA was started in 1970 when the federal government, Congress, passed the OSHA Act of 1970. That created OSHA. It also created the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, which decides contested OSHA citations. And then it also had some language in there. One of the provisions says it's a general requirement for employers to essentially keep their workplaces safe and and free of recognized hazards. So it's a very general statement in this initial statute. And we've seen OSHA over the years try to use that to capture hazards that exist for which there is not a standard that already exists. So that's sort of the unknown when you're trying to consider your OSHA compliance efforts, is whether OSHA, if something were to happen, will identify a different hazard and then argue in a citation that you violated this general duty clause. And then I think secondly, I mean, in construction, it seems like fall protection is, I don't want to say everything, because obviously companies can get cited for many different things and there's many different hazards, but our office, including myself, has handled like dozens, probably hundreds of different fatality matters. And unfortunately, oftentimes it's a lack of compliance with fall protection standards. So, I mean, I wouldn't say everything in construction is fall protection, but it's a big issue, and compliance is a big issue.
Yeah, that actually makes sense because of what we do, right? And there's not enough to say about companies making sure that they follow those regulations, or not the practice, the way it's, the rules of the game in terms of fall protection, because it is designed to make sure people come back home safe, right?
Yeah, and it is, and it's really not a function of lack of knowledge about what you're supposed to do. I mean, there are instances where we'll hear, for example, a company simply just doesn't get it and needs to be educated on the standards better. But oftentimes it's just, this is the way it's always been done, and no one thinks it will ever happen to them. That's the biggest challenge. There's a million different excuses employees can use to not follow, the safety, rules, shall we say. But this notion that others don't follow the rules and nothing will ever happen to them. And really, it's things they've done countless times before. So it's like, if you never wear a seatbelt, you get in the car, hey, I've done this 1,000 times. I'm just going to the store. It's no big deal. But then on the 1,001 times you do it, it could be a really bad outcome. And that's what we've seen. Just no one thinks it's going to happen to them.
Yeah, I mean, our industry, maybe there's not, so this notion of, this is how I've done it for 30 years, 40 years, right? Like, okay, you've been doing it wrong for 30 years. It's
Yeah.
a thing in our industry. I think as we move into the future, I'm hopeful that we adopt more like a growth mindset type of, more adaptability, more flexible, more listening, more, is this true? Questioning our own experience, because that's the only way to innovate. I have a question regarding practices, best practices. What are I mean, there's so much that could happen that is, if you could have a violation, it gets very easy. It's possible, right? As much as you could have a very, very huge focus on safety, like you were saying at the beginning, but it still can happen. But if you had to take care of three major things, you said that already, for protection, what are the practices that people need to put in place? I'm talking about small companies with less resources, to make sure that they are in compliance, and that they start a journey towards constant improvement in the safety side of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. The three things that immediately come to mind, I'm sort of going to start without talking about a standard, but frontline supervisors are critically important to companies. You can have management that buys in. Let's say a management says, oh, we're going to do all this safety training, have toolbox talks, do everything. Okay, you do all the things OSHA would want you to do, but your frontline supervisors don't enforce it. That OSHA will tell you you have to have management buy-in. That's true. That might be number one, but number 1A is your frontline supervisors can't then do something completely different when they're on the site. So any company, you have to have good foremen or project managers or superintendents or whomever who understand safety. And if you have a company and your employees really don't have that knowledge, then I would recommend you get a safety consultant to come in, observe what you do. And even if a consultant makes you 50% safer, you're much better off than you were before that. So companies, they really need to have someone outside come in. We do that, but we will readily say having a safety consultant that lives in the field, does this every single day of the week, that's really helpful. And I guess that sort of ties in also with management buy-in. You got to spend money. I mean, you've got to invest in safety. So a new company, you would hope safety is not the last thing on their mind, but maybe sometimes it is. They want to get work, they want to get paid, they want to be profitable, have the equipment, tools, everything like that. And safety really cannot be an afterthought. At some point, it's got to be front and center in front of the whole company.
Well, so you said the frontline manager investing in safety,
Mm-hmm.
and did I miss one?
Oh, right. The third, I would say, my view is if you need to improve, of course you'd want to be perfect, but there's really no such thing. It is a journey. So whatever work you're doing, you need to identify, just putting aside compliance with specific standards. Just think safety. What are the hazards that we face? And you need to identify the hazards. Then you can figure out how are we going to control these hazards. And there's a whole hierarchy of hazard controls that employers can utilize. But many people are surprised to know that PPE is actually the last resort, right? You want to eliminate the hazard first if you can, and then there's some other stuff, administrative controls, engineering controls. But a company needs to know what the hazards are so they can deal with them. And really that should lead into compliance with OSHA standards. But OSHA sets forth a minimum health and safety standards. So if a company says we're OSHA compliant, that's great, but if OSHA is missing a potential hazard, you might be unsafe, right? So I would say companies just coming up, just trying to get work, learning the business, maybe they have the expertise to perform the work, but don't have the safety know-how. They really need to know what are the hazards. Oftentimes, a hazard, you only recognize a hazard after an accident or an injury. So you want to try to figure out that before something happens.
Well, when I remember when I started the company 16 years ago, by then I already had, I think, probably 22, 21, 20, 22 years ago. I did I did OSHA 30 when I was working I was a project manager, but they were very conscious of safety. They had a huge payroll, and when there's an accident, you know what that means. And I also did OSHA 500. It wasn't my role,
Right.
but obviously education, it's always been something I never say no to. And when I started a company, which is what I would tell someone that has a company and you don't have the money to be hiring people, at least, like you said, the supervisors, meaning whoever is, if you are it, then you do it.
because when you're in the field and you are passing by a ladder, it could be as simple as that. Somebody didn't, you're not following those standards, or the hard hat, and to this day, I go to a job site and the eye becomes pretty good at it, at looking at something and say, hey, wear your hard hat. That's one. And the other thing I would say, you have to have the certainty and the certainty to speak up, to say it, even if it doesn't matter who you are. But that's also part of a culture. If there's a
Hmm.
company where they don't, you're going to be ridiculed, and the top doesn't, is not open to that, then, or doesn't give training on how to communicate, on how to have crucial conversations, or etc., then you're going to have situations that potentially could be avoided. But because the culture is, it's more a toxic culture and doesn't embrace transparency, might be a disadvantage for that business owner.
Yeah, I mean, these are fantastic points. That's really, when I talk about management buy-in, I always think of like new employees and new hire training and orientation. You can tell a lot just from new hire training and initial safety training. Workers know, oh, this is really important. The company's serious about safety, because they can get the tone of that training right up front. If it just looks like it's a routine thing and okay, you're just checking a box, you had your safety training, now get in the field and that's, you don't want that. You want employees to know they have stop work authority, they have the right to speak up, that safety is paramount. And really, that's the first day. I think workers can figure out right away if safety is an afterthought or no thought at all, or it's something, oh, they're actually going to be watching us and we need to do things by the book. So,
And yeah, and the thing, what, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. If we knew how much, because like my partner, who's also my husband, we met in the industry. He was a superintendent and I was a project manager. Even till today, I mean, it's part of who you are. If you're doing something that is not even in your house, this can save you from trouble or people around you. When you see something that, like going on a ladder with a bunch of stuff in your hands, people that don't know do that stuff. Like, I wouldn't do it because I know what can happen. But it's simple. But I think maybe from the leadership perspective, there's ways to influence this knowledge so that there's more acceptance. And what I mean is, I think also it's required our leadership in the industry to upgrade our level of influence, and how to influence the thoughts, the mind, the feelings and emotions of people, so they actually, to gain leverage. Because I find, I went to a job site the other day. I'm not saying where, but it was a huge job site. I mean, huge. And obviously, the bigger the job site, the more sophisticated is the safety program, right? The companies
right.
are really large, have a very admirable safety program. And I was surprised to a certain degree to hear that one of the biggest obstacles is the drinking in the job site,
Oh,
using the substance abuse. And I don't know if it was drinking or drugs or both. I think it probably was both, but maybe the drinking. So to the point that people will leave behind the proof of
yeah.
of of what they were doing. And obviously, substance abuse, it doesn't matter how much training you have, you're not in your best behavior. So why is this still such an issue?
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever root out all non-compliance, but there's got to be, on a site like that, say you see, or people are drinking. I mean, that's where the leadership, whoever has the authority, you need to either really stop and figure out what's going on. If you're in charge of a project and you show up and you see like beer bottles and stuff around, I don't know. I don't know if companies think this is realistic, but I think you have to, I don't know, would you shut the job down or find out who the contractor is? And I mean, there's different provisions in contracts and all that, but I mean, bottom line is something has to be done and workers need to know it's not permissible. So that's where discipline comes in. I don't know. You just can't move on and leave it behind, right? It can't be an issue that you say, oh man, no one's listening and keep going. There's got to be, someone's got to step up. And like you said, leadership, that's it. Try to get evidence. And I mean, you just can't have that. That doesn't only endanger the lives of the workers who are doing it to themselves, but other workers, right? These are multi-employer work sites. So what one worker or his or her subcontractor does could impact 5 others, right? So yeah, that's alarming. I'd be very concerned about that.
So in your 24 years, what has been the most challenging case that you have participated in? And challenging in any aspect. I was thinking kind of dramatic, but to give you a pre-frame, I am here I want to say 5 years ago, there was a bridge collapse here in Miami. And that was pretty dramatic, right? People died. And so for you, what has been the one that has been the most TV or movie type of incredible, I can't believe this happens?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, when it comes to some of the matters, maybe all of them, but the ones that are most challenging, having, I'm a certified safety professional, or took that exam and all of that stuff. The thing that's, I would say, most challenging because it's the most bothersome is I've had a number of cases that are fatality matters, and you cannot figure out what happened. Okay, you've got witnesses before, witnesses after. We had one case where a standoff bracket on suspended scaffolding, that bracket fell. No one was doing anything with it. It had been torqued very tight 2 days earlier, and it fell, and there was a really bad outcome, and no one could figure it out. And you start wondering, well, what is it? I mean, are we not getting the truth? Does someone out there know and we're just never going to find out? And I found that oftentimes, more often than not, I might say, with some of these really bad injury cases, you really can't figure out where the departure from what should have been done occurred. And, we've had matters that have started and ended, and there are bad incidents, and you never figure out what it was. I mean, the outcome, right, and a loss of life or whatever, but it just underscores to me, and I get very preachy sometimes about safety, but it underscores how dangerous this work is. And maybe I have, a bigger view of the danger because the matters we handle are all, many are bad. Oftentimes OSHA shows up, there's been no injury, right? There might be just an anonymous complaint of a hazard or a violation, but that's been the most bothersome. All the cases have some bad facts really sometimes, but it's not knowing where is the departure from the proper procedure. And the one I gave as an example, there's probably 10 more where there's just so many theories what happened, and no one ever figures out exactly what caused it. So those are the bothersome ones because, as a safety professional too, the notion of, okay, hazard identification. Well, if there's a really bad accident, you can identify a hazard, right? It was a fall hazard. It was a falling object hazard. Maybe, if there had been compliance with some other standards, the ultimate injury wouldn't have occurred. But you kind of can't learn from it sometimes, or there's a limit on how much you can learn because you just don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that are bothersome.
And how does OSHA rules when you don't know what happened?
Well, OSHA, it's funny. In some ways, OSHA's not black and white, but in some ways it is like open and shut. There's a set of standards and regulations. OSHA will look at the facts, what happened in an incident, or if there is no underlying incident or injury, they'll just look at the conditions at the site and say, do any of these violate the slew of regulations and standards that exist? So in that case, for example, where the standoff bracket fell and no one knows how or why, OSHA shows up on site. They're not just looking to confirm causation, like, hey, what caused this? And they're looking at completely other issues, like, was there a hazard communication program? Was there PPE? Was there fall protection? Anything they see in plain view can be a violation. So oftentimes it'll be, just say, for example, there's an injury. We show up on site and our clients oftentimes are thinking, hey, this, legitimately, they're thinking this wasn't our, we didn't do anything wrong, and they're trying to justify what happened or explain it, give more context. And OSHA's there. That's really only part of it. That could be a civil case, right? An injured subcontractor's employee could sue an owner, or sue a general contractor, sue other subcontractors. But OSHA's, they look at it more broadly. They're not just going to look what happened here. They will definitely look, oh, this, this standard covers this. Look, we see it's not being complied with. So oftentimes an injury just provides an occasion for OSHA to show up. And then once they're on site, they can cite you for any areas of non-compliance they see in plain view.
No, nobody wants OSHA on their job site.
Yeah, we respect OSHA. We're happy that, their efforts to keep workers safe. But if you did an anonymous poll, I think most people don't want them on their sites.
Yeah. So going back to, I know you've been a guest lecturer in Columbia University. Can you give us more light on that and the construction management program? Because I'm pretty sure you're proud of it. And how long have you been doing it?
So I think I've been doing that about 5 years now. I was a member of Safety Executives of New York, called CENI or CENI, depending on who you ask. But a professor there, Joe Schwed, who I know and like a ton, he very nicely asked me to be a guest lecturer there once, and it was about Construction Law 101. So in New York, there's a statute that no one likes. It's called the scaffold law. But I would talk about the scaffold law, which is a state statute. It's called New York Labor Law 240, subsection 1. It might sound obscure to others outside of New York, but if you're doing work in New York and you're a New York attorney, you know it all too well. So I would talk about that. I would talk about OSHA. I would talk about workers' comp, and really how everything fits together. Really, if someone gets injured on a construction site, what are all the different claims, the different venues, exposures, things like that. And what I really loved about, and I do love about this, is the students are so inquisitive. I mean, you better be ready. They will ask questions. Okay, so, and they've, many of them have stayed in touch. They're just really, they're bright minds, but even more so, they're just very interested in the subject. So it's really inspiring to see, students and those by and large younger than myself, really excited to start their careers. So I will say one of the fun parts at the end, I quiz them. There's matching, triple matching, true false. So it's just an opportunity to have some fun, but at the same time, hope that they take away some big concepts and really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was going to ask you, talking about students and innovation, about robotics in the workplace, in the construction sites. Is that something already that OSHA is already taking into consideration? I saw the other day a robot being tested, that runs, jumps, carries tools. I mean, how will that be treated?
Well, the good thing is OSHA is seeking to protect humans. So I guess if the robot gets injured, obviously the robot can't sue. Yeah, I mean, this will be a new hazard for anything that's designed to make our lives better, easier, more efficient, safer. There's obviously going to be some new risk, right? One of these robots falls over, a guardrail, and falls, it could be catastrophic. So we haven't seen many robots or any of this stuff yet, but I bet I almost could guarantee it's a matter of time. There'll certainly be an incentive to, do this. But yeah, so far we haven't seen OSHA really getting involved with that. There was an issue, like the drones. That was an interesting thing. They are using drones for their own inspections, right, to get better vantage points and such. And maybe contractors are using drones to a certain extent as well. But it's just natural progression. I would expect to see it. And nothing really would surprise me at this point in the future with that.
Well, actually, maybe the robot, if it gets ruined, it's fine. But the robot can kick somebody, and the person can.
Yeah.
I mean, the robot can actually become a hazard itself for humans. I'm just
Yeah.
now I'm
Yeah,
just I haven't seen it, but we'll see how it evolves.
Yeah, I haven't studied this. I'm not someone, worried that robots are going to take over the world and yet, but with artificial intelligence and all the stuff. But it is true. I mean, robots, how can you train judgment? I don't know how that could happen. And a lot of decisions have to be made right on the spot. So for right now, I'd be ready to double my investment into my foreman project superintendent. But robots, as far as, dangerous tasks, things like that, there's probably, there is some.
I'm gonna send you a video. Well, I'm gonna send you a video so you can see it, just to get you curious.
Okay, I'll have to. I like LinkedIn. I'll probably post something about robots on LinkedIn.
Actually, I'll do it and I'll tag you. I'll do it. How's that?
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good.
So tell me about, you're in New York, so it's a pretty diverse community. What are your thoughts about the diversity, equity, inclusion, more people joining the construction industry, so many knowledgeable people exiting the industry because of being part of the baby boomer generation, and not, the newer generation didn't really join the industry maybe when we would have wanted. So now we're having a lot of work issues with labor. How do you see this? And the reason why I ask this is because there's people that don't speak English, right? And maybe the training is always important. So maybe employers don't have a setup to communicate these toolboxes. Have you found challenges as a result of that?
Yeah, I mean, employers are 100% obligated to train. If there's a number of workers in a different language, they have to train in that language. Okay. This is something. There's always something that OSHA is really focusing on at a particular moment. There was a time not that long ago where focusing on training in the language of employees. I mean, if you're obligated to train your employees so they're safe, and you can't communicate, I mean, communication is everything, then that's a big issue. We've handled matters where companies get cited. Sometimes we've disagreed, all right? We do think there wasn't a language barrier, but it was an issue we had to address, that the training wasn't done in the worker's language. And that's not just on the site speaking, right? Communication, that would be your health and safety program. I mean, a health and safety program can be the best document standing alone in the world, but if it's not communicated and no one looks at it, it's meaningless almost. So that's a big part of it. And yeah, I mean, just as far as opportunities, things like that, I mean, the construction industry really, I mean, I haven't studied that a ton, but just it really should reflect the population and should be open, right? There is this conception, and maybe it's a true conception, that there's, it's men, older, Caucasian, and that's kind of it, right? And, it's sort of with like contingency or not contingency planning, but when you're trying to get younger generations in and keep carrying businesses in. And I just think diversity is a good thing. And I think it's an important, even gender diversity, right? I mean, women in construction, that's something I admire you a ton. In a business that's dominated by one gender, I think there's got to be challenges that, many people don't appreciate what those challenges really are. So it's actually tremendously impressive. And I just, encourage everyone to follow their dreams like you did, because it's don't let anything stop you.
Right. Yeah. No, we are. I said the other day, I'm not in the business of limitations, and I believe that we are more. We really have so much more potential than what we think, or what we have learned to believe. And so, yeah, I'm with you. So tell me something about, how does a company, if they're listening and maybe they're not as experienced, or how do you prepare, or how do you embrace, and let's say we motivated them and they want to learn more about OSHA, because really OSHA is here to protect us, and there's a lot of resources to prevent us from having issues. There's training, so how do we, what do you recommend? Where could people go and stop and learn more about, be more prepared, more knowledgeable to prevent accidents?
Yeah, I mean, any company that provides safety training, I mean, myself, we, even as having been a certified safety professional and just having knowledge in the industry, really having someone come in, I think even like a lunch and learn, just, you need training, okay? I don't think you can have someone come in an hour and everyone's going to walk away feeling safe and understanding it. You really need an investment. We spoke a bit ago about this, but you need an investment. Got to be continuous. We had one client where once a year they went to, this was, in upstate New York, like a lodge. I'd rent out, like it was like at the old Moose Lodge or something for a long weekend, and everyone get together. And the idea was that they would take care of safety effectively for the year, that weekend. Okay, here's our annual safety refresher. And it's like, that's one of the most dangerous mindsets. And it was, the company's a good company. It is. There was nothing willful, but it can't be just a one-time thing. You've got to do it continuously. So companies want to learn about OSHA. I mean, in OSHA 10, it just gives you a general familiarity with OSHA and things like what you did in OSHA 30, that 500 class that goes very deep into things. But get a safety consultant to really look at your business, look at your health and safety program, look what you do day to day. I mean, do you do pre-task planning, job hazard analyses, all these types of things? What written records do you maintain? Sometimes, not always, because, someone will argue the counterpoint, I know, but the more records you have, the better, because it shows you're doing more. And then again, records are only as useful as, like, if people are sincerely doing the stuff. But it's just got to be, you need a health and safety program, and that's it. It's got to have many different things you do, and it's just got to be a part of what the company is. And then there's a total flip side to all of this, which is if OSHA shows up, what do you do then? And we get involved with that, and we give training. Others can get training on what are your rights, because you do want to be safe. You do have to have, this continuous improvement. you need to have an effective health and safety program, have good results with the program, but also you really should know what to do when OSHA comes in the door if they do. You don't want to say, okay, here's all our filing cabinets, I'll order lunch. I mean, you need to know what your rights are. You need to assert your rights and, protect the company as well. Cooperation is always, very important, but at the same time, companies do have rights, and this is a federal governmental inspection. So you should try to know those rights so everything goes the way it should.
And these trainings, do you provide these lunch and learns virtually?
Yeah, really anyone who asks, we would do. We do lunch and learns all the time to management teams. It's not really anything that requires, to be honest, a ton of preparation because we've done it so much. What we usually do want to know, when we're talking to a company, we do want to know what is, some basics about their safety performance, areas of concern, how they're set up, what they do day to day. But we can usually get that in a 15-minute conversation. And then we try to speak to some of those issues and tailor it to the company.
Sounds good. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do it?
The best is my cell phone number, which is basically my professional DNA. Okay. They can email me at OgletreeDeacons, michael.rubin@ogletree.com, or anyone can call me on my cell. It's not hidden. I'll say it. It's 646-761-1692. And we're very responsive. Anyone ever needs help, that's what we do. We try to help immediately. So we're always looking for opportunities to help. You didn't ask this, but that's one of the reasons we like what we do. And in particular, I do so much, because when companies call us, they usually really need help, and we recognize that. So we really want to help and, provide some assistance.
Yeah, you can tell how passionate you are about the topic, but more so helping and prevention and being a solution-driven approach. It's more of a solution-driven approach. Some people are afraid of calling an attorney, but I can see that you become a partner to your client. So, which I congratulate you for that.
Oh, thank you. It's funny in that respect. I've probably given, we'll just say, many presentations at industry events. And at the end, I always say, please call me. I'm always happy to take the call. And, basically I'll say it's free. Just call me if you need a second opinion or something. We want to make connections and help companies. And if you ever don't know who to call, don't be scared. Just like you said, people are scared to call an attorney. And some do take me up on it, but I'm surprised more don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to change my delivery.
Well, I'm going to call you. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do a lunch and learn.
Great.
I think it's sometimes we use our insurance company to do these trainings, and we do have an on-site in-house safety officer. But I think that's it's also good perspective from the when I want to know more about how to prepare myself, not to have that, to avoid it, obviously, but if I had to go through a situation, how do I? And obviously, we've been in large companies, so we have, but it's better that my people learn more, and that way we can continue our relationship.
Sounds fantastic. I'll tell you in advance, there's many rights that employers have they just don't know about. So we'll be happy to tell you. I'm sure you know about this stuff, but hopefully tell you more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your presence and sharing. I see how much you care about sharing. We have that in common. And so maybe I think I'll talk to you later more about some initiatives that we have, because we've started a Lunacon Academy and also an incubator program for small businesses. And
Wow,
so
great.
maybe you can you can be part of that lecture since you love lecturing.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm there. That sounds great. I want to thank you so much for the invite to talk about safety and OSHA, learn more about your business, and tell you more about what I do and our practice group does. So really, my profound thanks, and it was really enjoyable.
And I want to close. Thank you. I want to close saying that a site that there is safety is in consideration is a very, very clean site. A lot of times housekeeping is probably one of the causes of bigger causes of issues. And housekeeping, you can tell if a job site is well planned, is clean, the materials are not all over the place, they're organized, and that means there is leadership as it in relationship to the culture of planning, a culture of communication, accountability, etc., etc. So I hate going to a job site that is all over it's a mess. And when I have
Yeah.
seen that in my own projects, because I have to tell you, we're not a perfect company, to me, it's a representation of the superintendent. So I cannot talk more about how important a clean job site is. Would you agree?
I agree 1,000%. And I'll never forget, I attended a safety conference and there was a panel discussion. This wasn't even in construction. I can get back to that in 10 seconds. But in general industry, like in factories and plants and things like that, OSHA inspectors will even form an impression of a company just by using the bathroom in the facility, right? Is it a mess? Does it show no one really cares? No one picks up things like that. So that overall, that overall presentation really does tell a lot. And aside from just the way it looks, that general notion, specifically, yeah, that's hazards, right? There's a reason OSHA and any safety professional would say housekeeping is important. You've got falling objects, tripping hazards, slip hazards, all these different things. Let's remember construction, you've got sometimes multiple trades on site, different tools, different equipment, you name it. There's no room to have stuff scattered all over the place. It's just really a bad thing.
And as something as simple as housekeeping, something as simple as including safety in your planning sessions when you're planning work and in your site meetings with trade partners and vendors. So it's because it's also forward thinking. That I cannot say how much, I mean, it really is so important and it's so simple because it's when we're scrambling that we're in a reactive mode that we open ourselves for these incidents that later on nobody wants.
So I'm literally chomping at the bit to talk as you're saying this because when I lived in New York, we had a client, there were two, one was a major hospital being built, and I think it might have been another hospital, but they're two, relatively well-known general contractors. And one, the project was going perfectly and, on time, budget, all these different things, and is going 100% according to plan. The other one was like just a complete disaster. It just seemed like it was stalling behind schedule. And I spoke with, I don't remember the person's title, but one of their project executives. He said, the reason we are so successful every single morning, and this is the GC, we map out exactly what we're going to do, and they do a pre-task planning. And basically, they have an understanding of how everything's supposed to go, the safety, all aspects. And you would think everyone would know that, and anyway, but they just have this planning every morning. So their entire team, and it might have taken time for them to do that, but the time investment, there were dividends on the way the project went. So
absolutely.
what you're saying appears to be tested and it's proven to be true.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do, and again for sharing your knowledge. And we'll see you next time.
All right, Patricia, thank you so much to you and your staff and your team, and look forward to talking more. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.